day or good night. Thank you so very much for watching this video, which is basically directed to Derek Prince Ministries, to the people who look after the heritage of this wonderful and humble servant of our Lord Jesus Christ and the Creator of heaven and earth. If you wonder what the horrible accent is Hungarian, and I myself am the son of the late Péter Uzoni, who was a high-ranking and respected kind of like elder of Faith Church. At a certain point, he was even made president of Faith Church. I'm his firstborn son. I hope that you will forgive me for not being overly how should I put it, systematic in what I'm about to say. There won't be a lot of structure to it necessarily. I didn't mean to do this. I wanted to leave this whole thing behind. I don't like to engage in this whole thing anymore. I'm going to just cut to the chase. Many people, unfortunately, still consider Faith Church a Christian congregation. Faith Church at a certain point used to be, I don't know how it is today, it used to be the biggest evangelical church in Europe. That's a big statement. I don't know how the situation is now. I know that the membership, at least back in the Hungarian main church, it's rapidly declining, and they're trying to keep the numbers up, or keep, basically luring gypsy people into the church, the same gypsy people who have been ostracized and basically frowned at before. Kind of like they were like, anyway, so that's the situation now. But it definitely used to be a really big church, especially back in the days during the so-called holy laughter. Sorry about these sounds. These are little chicks are being hatched at the moment. So the reason why I'm doing this right now is because a good friend of mine by the name of Attila Váradi, he uploaded quite a few videos from Derek Prince. Most of the time it's not a whole teaching. As far as I know, what I've seen from him was kind of like a few minute snippets from certain Derek Prince videos, and one of them, relatively recently, was about comparing Derek Prince's stance on Freemasonry and the senior pastor of Faith Church, Sándor Németh, the founder, one of the founders, and the senior pastor of Faith Church, Sándor Németh, position on the same. Just to compare and contrast the two. So, if anybody knows Derek Prince, his background, how he came from a very, very sophisticated, I should say, British aristocrat background, it was very uncharacteristic of him to talk bluntly about pretty much anything. It wasn't normally he would be very, very, how should I put it, polite, of forming any opinion which he couldn't necessarily back up from scriptures, like straight. He would always point out, this is only my opinion. I don't state it as a dogma or anything like that. This is just my opinion. And even in cases when he had to rebuke someone, he did it in a very cautious and very humble manner. Most of the time, when he was kind of like blunt and outspoken, very, very seriously, and in a very kind of like, I don't know what the right word for that is. My father was a much better translator and interpreter than myself. I have the document, I did the bloody thing, but I'm not good at it, unfortunately. Anyways, at that particular time, not just once, when Derek Prince spoke about Freemasonry, he was very blatant. He was very outspoken. He was very straightforward about it. He said, you cannot be a Christian and worship the only true God and be a Freemason at the same time. You cannot do that. And he very openly told about how if you or any of your ancestors have been involved in Freemasonry, you not only have to repent, but you also have to more than likely undergo deliverance. So this was very, very kind of like important, and it was a very, very important point he always made when he touched on this subject. This video that Attila kind of like made recently, in which he compared the two, was very, very revealing. We have always kind of like knew, okay, just a few words about myself, so you can kind of like put me into context and what I'm about to say here. So I come from a long line of Lutherans on both sides, maternal and paternal sides. They both were Lutherans, and they were proud of it. My father joined this small church in the winter of 1981. My father and my mother. I was 5.5 then, and this was kind of like during the, obviously the communist times, and it was. My father was a very successful interpreter and a translator, and he was also a trained agricultural engineer. He was pretty good in English, but he was even better in German. He was a very, very intelligent person, and also, I would say, a very ambitious person. I think that led to his downfall, so to speak, because he joined, this organization, this small church. Back then it was, I don't know, it was maybe 100 or something like that people. The church itself was kind of like founded, or it started in 1979, I believe. So it was just basically in 2 years my father joined, and my mother. Yeah, so at that time it was whatever the church did was illegal, basically, by communist, state standards. So it wasn't. Anybody who joined, the church, basically risked of paying a price for it. Basically, the most important one would be that he or she wouldn't see any advancement in their careers. That was out of the question. If anybody learned that you went to this particular church, you would be marginalized, to say the least. Nothing other than that, nothing really bad happened to you. It was mostly just that. I have been there, like all in all, I spent approximately 4 decades. Not necessarily in the church. I spent more, I would say, like 3.5 decades, in the church, but I spent 4 decades being loyal to the church and the person of Shandor Nemeth, the senior pastor. What opened my eyes, excuse me, sorry. What really opened my eyes was how, during the so-called, I'm not going to say the word, what happened in the past few years worldwide. There was this thing that many people likened it to the Great Plague or something, and it turns out many people realized from the very beginning that something was very, very off about all this. All the communication, the official narrative was absolutely off. And by that time, I knew quite a lot about a certain medical intervention that was basically pushed left, right, and center by pretty much everybody all across the world. And by that time, I tried to warn of the dangers of this type of medical intervention. And so when this whole thing actually kicked in, and that was in 2020, I believe, early 2020, and when this whole thing really was started, I realized that nobody really cared about, in the church leadership, nobody really cared about the fact, that the Bible says that 100 or 1,000 shall fall by your side and 10,000 by your right hand, and it shall not come near thee. And that's what Psalms 91 says. Also, there are quite a lot of other promises in the Bible that Jesus Christ died for our sicknesses. He was wounded, and in his stripes we are healed. So we could with many other folks, we could refer to these scriptures all as much as we wanted, and the church leadership wasn't interested. They just wanted to go ahead and enforce even stricter rules in the church, in the congregation, than the actual bloody state, which in itself was quite strict. In Hungary, it was one of the strictest one when it comes to these tyrannical measures that were which were implemented by the state. Like a lot of people lost their jobs, you know how it went. So during this time, the senior pastor basically decided to shut down, and close basically the church, even churches in the countryside, and a lot of people wasn't happy about it. They were like, why cannot we come together still? Now, in retrospect, a lot of people agree that it was probably from the Lord, because that opened the eyes of a lot of people. I'll just give you one example. During that time, the senior pastor once said, when he was sitting in front of his bookshelf, behind a beautiful mahogany or whatever desk or table, whatever it was, and he was explaining, he was saying that since Jesus Christ is not among us, only this we can only hope. Our only hope in this is this medical intervention. That was said by a person who not only considers himself a Christian, but he considers himself a pastor, a man of God. Okay, another video that Attila basically translated and uploaded was concerned. What was that again? Give me a second. Yes, when Derek Prince was talking about some characteristics which, if you see in your church, just flee. That was basically the implication. That was what he was talking about. If you see these phenomena in your church, then what you're dealing with is not a church, it's a cult. And the strange thing is that each and every one of those things that he listed was absolutely true for Faith Church, which it was called later on. It was named Faith Church, this congregation I grew up in around the time of the change, or slightly before, I guess. So just give me a second. So just so you understand the situation. The rest of my family, more or less, they are still part of this church in different ways and in different levels of loyalty, I should say. I live in the United Kingdom right now. I've been living here for some 8 years or so. I left the country because in my home country, Hungary, because I was just totaled down in every single way. I was ashamed of myself. Everyone else was ashamed of me. I was a total disaster. One of the main reasons for that was because I got married in 2000, and my marriage from the very beginning was very good on the one hand, but in many aspects it was an absolute mess. And one of the probably the main reason for that was because I was financially really unsuccessful. And the main reason for that was is that everybody who knew me, they knew that I was a really talented guy in many aspects, in many areas. Like if I just wanted to kind of like list my the jobs that I did, the workplaces I worked for, most people, even if they live to 100, and they work all their lives, all their life, they wouldn't work at as many places I did. So I have a very wide experience. I worked in all sorts of roles and whatnot, and everybody was really kind of like, nobody really understood how come that the person who is as intelligent, I'm not blowing my own trumpet here, I just inherited that, I didn't do anything about that really. Most of my life I have been a really, how should I put it, laid back, I should say lazy person in a sense. But I inherited a lot of capabilities from my late father and also my mother. But I was really unsuccessful, and people didn't really understand why. Even in my church, my ex-church, a lot of people, didn't really understand. There was a person by the name of Bartusz Laszlo being the given name, Bartusz being the family name, Bartusz Laszlo, or Laszlo Bartusz. Laszlo, kind of like is Leslie, let's say. He lives in the United States. He has been living there for quite a few years by now. He wrote a book. He already wrote 2 books on Faith Church and the whole phenomenon. Unfortunately, himself, he became an absolute left-wing, hyper-grace guy, and an absolute Biden supporter and all that, which is quite weird for a Christian. But so in many aspects, I don't kind of like endorse, what the positions he's taking. But when it comes to Faith Church and whatever Faith Church is about, he was on target every time. Both of his books, there were several allegations in these books, serious allegations and statements. Not one of them was successfully challenged by anyone. So much so that there some things were challenged, and the senior pastor attacked him on several levels. Most importantly, at court, and not just him, but other investigative journalists as well. All these lawsuits concluded that he was in the wrong. The senior pastor, Németh Sándor, he was in the wrong. All of them. They didn't manage to win one single substantial case. The only one, as far as I know, that they won was about the unlawful. Basically, it was a copyright claim, an unlawful usage of a photo or some photos in his book. That was it. Well, when it comes to the factual statements, in his book, actually, so László Bartos spoke the truth, or wrote the truth, I should say. In this book, he actually, in his first book, which he wrote about Faith Church, he actually, there is one chapter in it, which starts with my name, and it's all about my late father and myself, and basically he is using that chapter to show this brainwashed and totally blind and blindly loyal mentality that Faith Church members have towards the senior pastor. So he basically uses my example to show how people are absolutely brainwashed, and they even deny their own fathers, mothers, family members, closest family members, and they just sacrifice anything and everything just to seem loyal in the eyes of the leadership. And he was absolutely right. And for 25 plus years, I was really angry about this, because this book was such a big hit in Hungary that basically almost everybody knew what was written in them. And there in this book was my name, black on white. And it was quite embarrassing. So each time I went to a job interview, I had this thing in mind. I was wondering, did this person read that book or not? It wasn't easy. Anyways, in this book, László Bartos basically explains why, in this church I never made a so-called career. Because the senior pastor is not an idiot, anybody who can kind of run an organization like this is not an idiot. And he knew me from, from the age of, 5.5 or 6. And he knew, that his son was younger than me, obviously still is younger than me, and by a few years. And he knew that he probably perceived that I was more talented in a few areas, and just to be sure, that I don't outshine, his future or whatever, He just wanted to make sure to keep me down. It's really weird. For a long, and it was written in Bartosz Laci, last of Bartosz's Könyv, book Könyv, that's the book for Hungarian. It was written there, and it was there, and I knew about it, and it didn't bother me because I was like, well, he's the man of God, and he also has his shortcomings and all that. Well, the thing is, here's the deal. My father, my late father, died in 1996. The December of 1996, I believe it was, just before his, was it his 44th, 45th birthday? I think he was 44. He was born on the 1st of January in 1952. Yeah, and he died in 96, December of 1996. So, and on his deathbed, we were in a really bad relationship before he passed. He was a really, really strict man, and he beat me up, like most fathers would back in those days. We're talking about Hungary, we're not talking about the West. But he was beaten up by his father when he was doing stuff that he wasn't happy with, and he beat me up quite badly a few times. What I hated about it was this methodical approach, with it. That there were times that he would tie me down, and then I didn't like it, obviously. And after that, there was this ceremonial, part of it that I had to apologize. And if I didn't apologize, and sometimes I didn't, I just chose not to. And then he would continue beating me, and it wasn't fun. And I built up a resentment about it and about the other things as well. I could see through his ambition and basically. But on his deathbed, we kind of warmed up towards each other a little, to some degree. We even had some theological. You're going to laugh about it, but yeah. There was my father dying of cancer on his deathbed, and we were having theological arguments. Anyways. And there was this time, I don't want to go into details, but there was one time that my late father, so back then my father was, remember I was 20 years old then. So my father perceived that there was he saw an opportunity, that there was some sort of kind of an opening, that he could talk to me. And just out of the blue, he never talked about such things to me. He had this kind of this old school approach, that there are things that only concern adults and grown-ups, and there are things that are for children, and we were children. So he never really talked about these things. I noticed even before he got seriously ill that there was some sort of kind of a division. There was kind of an animosity between himself and the senior pastor and his wife, by name Judith. Okay, so, and I noticed that my mother was siding with Judith, the wife of the senior pastor, and that made my father really, really frustrated and angry. And I noticed that, and I'm ashamed to admit that I sided with my mother, and with the senior pastor and Judith, and basically I was of this understanding what still characterizes pretty much everybody in this church. Chandon Nemeth is the man of God, all right? He is the man of God, and if you oppose him, you oppose the Holy Spirit. There's a fat chance that you will commit the unpardonable sin, blaspheming the Holy Spirit, if you oppose what the senior pastor says. there are other things, obviously, that if you don't pay tithes, then you rob God Himself. That is still a kind of like a dogma in Faith Church. Yeah, they don't ever say that you have to, and they always will say, use the excuse that we are not taking, like we are not taking notes. We don't have a register. We don't have anything like that. We don't kind of like have a. We don't have an inventory or anything like that. We are not taking notes who is paying their tithes and who doesn't. But there is always this, not a problem. You can choose not to pay tithes, except you're robbing God Himself if you don't pay tithes. So that's how it works. This is just one of the many, many things, that kind of like bothered a lot of people. And anyways, back to the story. So my father was sorry about that. So on his deathbed, my father told me that it was a really bad decision. As far as I remember, what he said was that it was the worst decision in his life, or worst decision of his life, to join Faith Church. And it was just out of the blue. It was absolutely unexpected. It was kind of like it was like a total shock to me, really, these things that he told me. I knew that, not necessarily because of the content of what he was saying, although there was a certain point where that was quite shocking, in and of itself. But the whole kind of like this outburst of honesty was what was really weird to me. And I have to say that at that point, my father was perfectly sharp. Later on, maybe a few or 2 weeks after, there was a gradual decline in his mental capacity because his whole body was becoming toxic. His whole body, the skin, became yellow. The white of his eyes became yellow. His body couldn't detoxify anymore, and there was a horrible stench. Obviously, that's what happens. I think the kind of cancer he had was, I believe, as far as I remember, it was like stomach cancer. Strangely enough, the wife of Derek Prince as well died of cancer soon after. There was this animosity between Derek Prince and the senior pastor, and then they started methodically cursing, especially Ruth, the wife of Derek Prince. So on his deathbed, my father told me these things, and the first thing that he said was that it was his worst decision, and he basically made a few points of why. And one of the things were like that because before he became kind of like an employee of the church, and before he became a so-called minister, before that he could very easily share the gospel with other people. But after that, it became really difficult because everybody just heard, okay, so what is your occupation? What do you do for a living? And he would say, well, I'm a pastor or minister. Say, oh, okay, yeah. And then they weren't interested anymore of whatever he was going to say. And before that was different. Like, yeah, he had, still has 7 kids. I'm the oldest. So that was quite unusual in those days. So yeah, that was one thing. The other thing was he mentioned something that when Derek Prince, I'm not really sure whether he was the one who mentioned that. It was so long ago, and so many things happened right afterwards. I don't remember exactly whether he mentioned that the Derek Prince back then to me. I'm trying to remember. What I do remember was that he told me that the senior pastor, Shandor, asked him, oh yeah, I remember how it was. So that Derek Prince told, yes, that's what happened. I remember now. So that senior pastor, Derek Prince, basically rebuked the senior pastor, Pastor Shandor, right? Nobody called him that back then. He was just Shandor. That's that. And then, yeah, one of the elders, started doing this stupid American, like custom, pastel Shandor, and then everybody followed suit, like idiots, infantile people. So, anyways, that the Derek Prince, when he was in Hungary, he told the senior pastor that I perceive that the people around you are afraid of you. And then my father told me, remember, like he's laying on his bed and he's talking to me. I'm standing in the door, basically, and he's talking to me. I was a 20-year-old, like typical, like idiot, when you're young and you're cocky and you know better. So he told me that after this, the senior pastor Shandor, asked him, like, do you think it is true? And my father, being the blunt Lutheran he was, he said, yeah. And my father told me that ever since, he fell out of, Shandor's grace, basically. And their relationship was never the same after that. And all these things, basically all the circumstances, all how these things happened, later on, good friends of my father filled in the details to me. And people whom I knew from decades, and I knew that they were in good relationship with my father, they told me how exactly it happened. I could give anybody 2 witnesses who are still alive and well, who were there and who witnessed this. Actually 3, at least 3. There are more, but there are 3 that I know myself. So that's just one thing. Yeah, he told me a few other things as well. One of the other things that he told me was that there was a certain person who used to kind of like minister on stage. I don't remember in what position, what he was doing, but he definitely was on stage in Faith Church, and he wanted out. And when he wanted to leave, he told my father, I don't know whether it was just like one-on-one or were there other people as well, but he told my father that I only ask one thing of you: please do not curse me. And my father was like on his deathbed, he was like just like that. So he said it as it was obvious what he meant by this, and it was obvious to me too. And at that point, I was just like, yeah, just, just because somebody's afraid of something, that doesn't mean that it's kind of like substantiated, like it's a real deal. That's what would happen. That would be my kind of like response to that. Now I know, being someone who also became an outspoken critic of all what is happening and what has happened in the name of God, in this congregation, I know exactly what they are talking about. I know. Good thing is, but I grew up in this church, so I have always I kind of like developed a kind of an immunity to this type of witchcraft and basically these curses in a way, so much so that they kind of like affect me, but I can live with them. So they don't disable me. They don't debilitate me, so to speak. They can give me a hard time, fair enough. But I can kind of like, it's like I can deal with them. It's only because from a very young age I have been myself kind of like abused and threatened and traumatized by the sheer presence of this person, Shandor Nemeth. For those of you who don't understand what I'm talking about, this person has such a domineering kind of like aura about him. He's such an air about him that this thing, many people, most people who are still loyal to him, they attribute this to he's such a, they say that he's such a great man of God, that there's this kind of like this aura around him, because it's the power of God. I'm here to tell you, no, it's not. That's a completely different thing. This guy has that kind of aura around him that you would only see. I'm sorry, I'm talking to Christians predominantly, I guess, but you would only see it in a Harry Potter movie, when that horrible guy, whom Ralph Fiennes, is playing, that's the bad guy, when he's he's surrounded by his people. That's the kind of air, that's the kind of feeling, that's the kind of atmosphere we're talking about here. That's the atmosphere. So everybody is really, really afraid, and they're shaking with fear. And Laszlo Bartos also writes about this in his book, and I can attest to it, and many other people. There was after my father. Oh yeah, just back. My father told me, this thing as well. Later on, I learned about this, that there is a so-called prayer commando. In Hungarian, it makes more sense. Basically, group of commandos, I should say. So it's like a squad, a prayer squad, I should say. Basically, and what they do is that they go systematically. They have a list of people and organizations, and they systematically go through this list, and they target everybody and on this list. And they use, there is this, the light version of it would be that all the demons and curses and whatever and influences coming from such and such a person, in the holy mighty name of Jesus, and by the power of the Holy Spirit, I take authority and power, and I rebuke you, and all that stuff. Yeah, but even against people who have just legitimate concerns and legitimate criticism about the church, or the criminal activity of the senior pastor, for example, or criminal practices, I should say. Another version, the hardcore version of what these people would do, would be that they say there are these so-called curse psalms of David. When David specifically asks the Lord to deal with his enemies in such and such a manner, and that's like, let them be like dust before the wind, and let their wife become a widow, let their children become orphans, and things like that. All right? So they do that. These people do that, and they're not shy about it. They do that. It is so bad that even today there are people who sit in the first row, or in the first few rows. They either sit there or used to sit there, and everybody knows that they are fed up. Sometimes not everybody, but their close circle of friends know, and the leadership knows that they are fed up and they want out. And still, they do not dare. They dare not to come out and say that I cannot do this anymore. They cannot. Even my father, when he was on his deathbed, he told me that what was it again? The way he put it was, I'm trying to remember. He said, so he said something about the senior pastor, some sort of critical thing, and then to which I replied that, but there is a great, power behind him. I said something to that effect, And then he replied, quite in an irritated way. He replied, "Yes," and he knows it full well. Or yes, and he knows that. So basically, that would be the most accurate translation of what he said. And it really shocked me because I'd never heard anybody talk about the senior pastor before. Anybody talk about him like that? That was shocking to me, because he talked about him as if he was just another person. And to me, he was the man of God. He was the anointed. He was the anointed one. He was the man of God. And he was the ministry gift. So that was weird. That was really, really weird to me. And he said a few other things as well, but some of which wasn't related to this whole thing. More like family, family related things. His relationship with his parents and other things, which again wasn't entirely unrelated to when I come to think of it, because the reason why we basically severed all ties with any friends and family who weren't part, who didn't join us, with following, like Pastor, like Shandor Neiman. It was kind of like it was a must. You had to do it. You had to sever ties with pretty much anybody who didn't follow suit. So basically, when you joined, Faith Church, you lost all contact with the outside world. So there was nowhere. You burnt all the bridges. There was no way to go back. That was the worst. So basically, you lived in constant fear, and constant fear of falling out of the grace of the senior pastor. Sometimes he would just go out on the stage and with one bloody sentence just totaled your entire reputation, your entire social network, and there you were. And then you had to do this canossa walk. And if you were lucky, you were pardoned. But if you weren't, you became a social outcast. And that's exactly what happened to János Toller. János Toller started out together with the senior pastor. He owned that house where the church started out, and out of what is the word for that? He still is alive. He also lives in the United Kingdom. He has been living here ever since. And the funny thing is that the same month they were chased away from their own house by the senior pastor and his wife. The same month my parents joined. If my father has always been like very, very fair and honest and transparent with his money, or the money of the church's money, and he expected that to be like that. So he had very high standards when it comes to financial honesty and trustworthiness. So basically, if my father had known what happened, sorry about that, I'm not a Satanist, I'm not any of these things, I didn't do that, the way they do it, I just did it like that, alright? I just want to make sure that I'm no part of any organization and nothing. And I worship the Creator, the Most High God, alright? And he's the only one I bow down to, no one else. So what was it again? What was I talking about? Give me a sec. Yes, if my father had known that that's what happened, he would have never joined. He would have never joined. There was a time when the senior pastor basically there was a family, their house, as far as I remember, it was a house, not an apartment. As far as I remember, it was a house. A young family, their house burned down. So the senior pastor said, "Okay, we are going to have a fundraiser for this family. So please, everybody, reach in your pockets and give, because this family is in need and they need a place to live." People were so touched, by this, what has happened to these people, and they were so, generous, that the amount that came in was equivalent of what they have lost in that fire. So they could have bought an entire new home out of that money that came in. All right. So when the money was counted, the senior pastor saw how much money came in, and he took out maybe I don't know, 1/5 or 1/10 of it. I'm not really sure. So he took out a small portion of it, and then told them, "Okay, give this to them." And then my father was like there, like absolutely like dumbfounded. He was like gobsmacked. Like what? That's how. What? And then the senior pastor Shandor, said they should be happy that they get anything. So it's very interesting. The senior pastor, there were a few people without whom this man, the senior pastor, Shandor Nemeth, would have never become who he is. One of them is János Taller, obviously, who owned that house. And I have to say that there's only, out of all the teachings of Derek Prince and all the teachings of other people, who generously sent, audio cassettes, to him and his wife, who was an English teacher back then, and Russian and English teacher, I believe. She is still, sorry, she's wearing the trousers, that's why. She has always been a really, really good English interpreter. She's probably the best I've ever heard in my life, and I encountered English interpreters. She's probably the best I've ever heard. She's very, very good. She is also a very domineering woman. Anybody who knows, their family, like dynamics and all that, many people go as far as to say that she is the real Jezebel in this whole setup, and the senior pastor Shandor Nemeth is only Ahab. I don't know that much, but I wouldn't be surprised if that was the case. Either way, the only thing that the senior pastor understood of this whole thing was how demons work and how curses work. I am convinced at this point that it is safe to say that these are the only things that he ever understood of Derek Prince's teachings. These are the only things. When it comes to love, when it comes to dying to self, when it comes to serving, none of that. No, none of that. Only these two things. So basically, when he realized, the senior pastor, "Oh, I like this house of János Taller, my buddy. I like this house." He basically came up with all sorts of weird stuff, saying about. He said all sorts of weird things about János Taller and his family background and whatever. That there is some sort of an unknown and unrecognized, but very, very dangerous and very very bad, spiritual influence on him, and because of that he should get out of that house, obviously, which took place again in the same month that my parents joined, in 1981 December. So that was one person without whom this church would have never started, at least not the way it did. So there were these people who were absolutely crucial and absolutely indispensable when it comes to the formation or birth of Faith Church Hungary. So János Taller was one of them, and the other one was very obviously Derek Prince and Ruth, his wife. I still remember when Derek Prince came when I was a small kid. I still remember those days, those times, and I still remember, Judith, the wife of the senior pastor, interpreted several times. My father did a few times, I believe. He definitely translated a few of his books, which were published by the church. But my father got some royalties after that, I believe. My father was a really, really good interpreter and translator. He also was like a very educated and also a man of class, I should say. So even before he got saved, he was interpreting for high-ranking state officials in Germany and even in Hungary, obviously, and in other places, in his field and outside of his field, meaning agricultural, engineering, and all that in that field as well, but also in general, like high-ranking state officials. So he was doing that a lot, and because of that, even when there was this conference in Jerusalem in 1996, I believe it was, so a bit earlier, obviously, because the end of the year my father passed. But even there, when he started interpreting, I should say, on stage, somebody was speaking in Hungarian, I would say it was probably it probably was the senior pastor, and he was interpreting in English and in German, consecutively, and people started, giving him an ovation about it. They were kind of like he was getting an applause for interpreting into. It was a bit awkward. He was getting that's how much respected he was, not just because of his kind of like knowledge, but he was a truly humble person when it comes to, and he was approachable. People could approach him. People could make contact with him, and he was just a normal person walking, like a based, normal, humble person who tried to be humble as much as he could, despite the fact that he was much smarter than most of the people around him, the senior pastor included. So anyways, that was another person. There was another person by the name of Gábor Iványi. My mother knew him from way back. My mother comes from also like a family of Lutheran ministers, and the father of my mother, so my maternal grandfather, was also probably done in by the state, because he was a very loved. He was a revered reverend. He was a minister, a Lutheran minister. He was a preacher, and he was a bit too, how should I put it, loved by the people. So the way these ministers die most of the time is that they ride their motorbikes and then somebody hits them, and then they die. So that is the standard procedure. That's what happened to Károly Kubinyi. Not soon after that, he basically described the working of Sándor Német's system without necessarily, as far as I remember, he didn't mention him by name, but he so perfectly described the way the system works that it was just a bit too uncomfortable. The title of this video of his message was a Pastor Kingdom or Shepherd Kingdom or something like that. It's still available on YouTube in Hungarian. I wouldn't be surprised if somebody just translated it soon into English. It was an absolutely masterpiece. I think it was inspired. He talks about how God hated this system that was set up basically by Samuel, and God didn't like it. That wasn't his perfect will. And he said how the king was going to abuse his power, and anyways, you know the story. Okay. So Gabor Iványi was someone who has been helping, along with his late father, obviously. He was helping all sorts of people who were like ostracized and persecuted for their faith, um, and especially with legal advice, like what kind of things you have to refer to, what kind of organizations you have to make contact, and all sorts of other things like that. So he was doing that. He was helping Faith Church when it wasn't even Faith Church. It was just a small group of zealous Christians coming together in Budaörs, which is to the west from Budapest, not far, the capital city. So so that was another person without whom the senior pastor would have never been become who he is today. A media mogul, I should say, and a very, very, very rich person who basically has ruined political parties, and he has been an absolute disgrace when it comes to dumping people whom he sided with, and then just backstabbing, people, political alliances, and making new ones for bigger money or bigger influence or just protection. So Gabor Iványi was one of these people. He helped a lot at the very beginning. Without him, it would have never happened. And he also was thrown under the bus by Sándor Németh, so much so that he considers him today one of his biggest arch enemies, and sometimes he would openly mock him, from stage. It's an absolute disgrace. There was another person by the name of what was his name again? Give me a second. Yeah, sorry, I had to think some. So his name was Sándor Ungvári, and he was another one. He was due to some administrative peculiarities. He had a preacher's permit from way back. So he had a small church, and somebody suggested to the senior pastor way back, when the church was harassed to some extent by the authorities. It was mostly just like threats and such things, basically harassment. It wasn't real persecution, I should say. It was harassment, which in itself is bad, but it wasn't as bad and nearly as bad as it is being portrayed today. It was just harassment from basically legal, mostly. They were like referring that the legal status of the church is not sorted. Basically, that was the whole thing, and because of that, they were the authority which was dealing with all sorts of religion and church related stuff. That was a whole department of the state of internal. I mean, the Ministry of Internal Affairs. They had an organization that was designated to deal with these things, and they suggested that the church should join forces, with this other church, which it was more historic, thing, but they were just kind of like. It was a Pentecostal church, and the senior pastor, strangely enough, wanted to become the leader of this whole thing, and he wanted the preacher permit, from this guy. And some elders of this church, Ungvári Sándor, we're talking about Sándor Ungvári, his son is still alive today. He's with us today. His name is Mihály Ungvári, and he still is alive and well. He's disabled. When he was a kid, he was playing with some Second World War II bomb in the bushes or something, and he blew off his legs, unfortunately. He's a great guy, and he tried to, when the senior pastor slandered after Sándor Ungvári died, because he also helped an awful lot. The senior pastor and Faith Church, when it was being formed, when it was kind of like forming, and in the very early days, he helped a lot. And after he passed, then the senior pastor, like everybody else, he threw him under the bus, and he slandered him, and never gave an opportunity to his son to clear his name of these allegations that Sándor Németh kind of like alluded to, and his henchmen alluded to about him. So I just basically listed 4 people or 5 who generously helped the Faith Church when it was born, and personally Sándor Németh. They helped him, and each and every one of them paid a big price, a huge price. Some paid the ultimate price for helping him. This man is a traitor. Not just a traitor. Many signs point in the direction. We know that, and it's very easy to see that he is very much connected with a certain Freemasonic lodge. Anybody who knows anything about these things know that. The big question obviously is he a member of that lodge or not? At this point, I'm convinced that he is. There is a list circulating with some names of politicians and other influential people, which actually states which politician or influential person is part or member of which lodge, and his name is there, along with the current Prime Minister of Hungary. They belong to the same lodge according to this list. Again, I cannot attest to the validity of this thing. I don't know whether it's true or not, but the connection is definitely there. That's 100%. And like Attila recently uploaded this video when he compares and contrasts Derek Prince's stance on Freemasonry and Sándor Németh's recent stance on Freemasonry. It's obvious that something is very, very off. And the funny thing is, I also heard about a certain meeting at around the time of the change. We are talking about 1990. So somewhere in those years, there was a certain meeting from which Sándor had to leave, and he told all these people, these elders that were there, he told them that, sorry guys, I have to leave, but I'll be back in an hour or so. Which he did. He came back after an hour, and he told these people that he met with some really influential people, and they told him that if he wants the church to be free from all this harassment and all that, and basically, in today's terms, he wants to become mainstream, he either has to cooperate with the Vatican or with the Freemasons. The two of which he chose the Freemasons, because he said, I come from, the other side, meaning the Catholics. He wanted to become a Roman Catholic priest. That's how he started out. And he said that I know how they are, so I would rather cooperate with the Freemasons. That was back then, and then a lot of things has happened. And the most obvious thing was that he just started behaving like at the very beginning, like somebody who actually wants political power. And he basically just hijacked an entire political party, who was probably the most influential party at around the change. He just took it over. What he did was he instructed many members of the church to go and join this party when this was formed. He was actually pushing it, that you guys, should actually become a political party. And when they did, he made a lot of people, from the church to join this party, Thus, the membership became the Faith Church membership. It wasn't Faith Church back then. They became, I believe, it was. I think it was. I'm not entirely sure. It was just. It came from Kenneth Hagin, basically. Not that. No. Okay. They wanted another grandfather for Faith Church because Derek Prince in itself, wasn't enough. They wanted someone else as well, so they can play this game of, you know. So Kenneth Hagin was, obviously the Word of Faith movement and all that, faith. So that's how it became Faith Church, as far as I know. Kenneth Hagin never came the way Derek Prince came. He didn't even know much about us, I believe, as far as I know. Derek Prince was very, very much involved in the birth of Faith Church. But either way, when this political party was born, a lot of Faith Church members just kind of like joined, and everybody was happy except those few who realized, what it was about, even back then. So basically, a lot of people knew, even back then, that this party is basically the party of Faith Church. And then, when he realized, and he just threw these ones under the bus, and he joined the forces with another party, and then another party, and then another party. So basically, it was all about money and power from the very beginning: political power, spiritual power, and very, very tangible, earthly money. That's what it was about. And we wouldn't, and everybody, all the people around us, like secular colleagues, and or even I was a kid, so school, what is it called, classmates and teachers, even, they told us it's all about money. Don't you see? So I was like, no, we are protesting. We're protesting. No. This guy is so selfless and everything. And then with time, it turned out, yes, that's just another thing. One of the greatest, biggest, thing was that opened up the eyes of a lot of people was that the senior pastor wanted to have a TV station. So what he did was he offered, basically he instructed his most trusted man by the name of Laszlo, and Levente Petrus. I guess they were the ones who most influential, in this whole thing, in this whole operation. He instructed these people, to these two, they are twin brothers. He instructed them to get all the wealthy people, and organize kind of like a supper, like a fundraising supper for dinner for them. And basically what they were telling them that you guys are going to have like shares, just like the 700 Club with, what was his name again? You remember the guy? Pat Robertson. So that we will have something like that. So you guys will have, if you contribute to this thing, you will have a part in it and all that. And a lot of people, not a lot of people, quite a few people gave massive amounts. So basically, so Sándor Németh, could buy this small, tiny, not very influential TV station, but now he had a TV station. And then, when it became, due to all sorts of very, very questionable financial and political games, it became really prosperous and everything. Then he took the majority of the shares, and using Liechtenstein, depending how you pronounce it, using a company based in Liechtenstein or Liechtenstein, he basically took the majority of shares for himself, and they became basically his, so to speak. So there was an article made about it in cooperation of two online news magazines really, and they made an article about it. And the conclusion of the article was, the title of the article was "Rich Priest of Poor Believers," something like that. And the conclusion of the article was that out of the give me a sec. So out of the, I cannot really find the right word. So out of the wealth, or out of the possession, that's it. So from the possession of out of shared possession of believers, it became the possession of Sándor Németh. So basically what they said was that there was a possession shared by the community of the church, the congregation, and it became the possession of Sándor Németh. That was the conclusion of the article. Now, so Sándor Németh took it to court because he said that that's not accurate, the way it was, stated, the way it was presented. It wasn't accurate. He lost it. He lost that. So basically now we can safely say that basically Sándor Németh is a thief. And it is safe to say, without having to worry about legal consequences really, because there is already what is it called? A legal case, a judgment. There was a decision, a court decision, that it is actually accurate. It's not. In layman's, that was the conclusion of the court decision, that in layman's terms, that is actually accurate. So I just want to basically go ahead a little and say that at this point, based on these court decisions and based on what we can safely say and safely know and safely say about Sándor Németh and his dealings, it is you can safely say that Sándor Németh, the leader, the co-founder and the leader of of what used to be the biggest evangelical church in Europe, is a thief. He's a slanderer, and what else was he? Anyway, sorry, it's not coming to me. There was quite a few other things which you can safely say now without any repercussion, really. Unfortunately. So, he's a traitor, obviously. The funny thing is, when he wanted to get that preacher's permit from Sándor Ungvári, right? What he did was, the elders from the church of Sándor Ungvári weren't happy about this kind of like quite, I should say, aggressive, or okay, if you want to go a little lighter, assertive, a bit more, zealous, assertive behavior of Sándor Németh. So they said, no, he shouldn't be, he should slow down a bit, just relax a bit, and not wanting to just, immediately take the whole thing over. We don't even know this guy, we don't even know who he is. And then when Sándor Németh was told that he cannot be, unfortunately, he cannot be the leader of this whole thing, the next thing he wanted was, okay, then in that case I want to be the cashier. I want to be, not the cashier, what is it? That is the word for this, in church circles, the person who deals with finances. I want to be that one. I want to be I want to be in charge of finances. So that's next what he wanted. So right after, when first he was basically, when he couldn't be Jesus, he immediately wanted to be Judas, so to speak. He wanted to be the in charge of the money. I know it's not the right analogy, but you get the point. So those who know him well, and those I somewhat do know him myself. I had some really really harrowing experiences when I was a kid. I was kind of like scolded by him a few times, which kind of like still I don't think I still healed up from those ones. Still, he's a very 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 weird person. He's very how should I put it? There is something about him. Somebody recently told me and explained it to me that he saw him in spirit, and he said that there is a fallen angel next to him each time that he goes on stage and preaches, which makes perfect sense. If you look at the faces and the body language of the people who sit in the first rows, while he is preaching, you can tell that something is very very wrong there. That those people are not being themselves. There is something bad. There is something off. Those people are kind of like absolutely feel really, really uncomfortable there, and they fake their smiles, they fake their nodding, they fake their everything is fake, and everything is kind of like forced. So something is not right there. Yeah. And what the way Attila Varadi, whose videos were taken down by YouTube to based on some copyright claims or something, it was more than likely that it was because of Nemeth Chandler's henchmen, did something, and that is the reason why they probably approached Derek Prince Ministries, and that's why it happened. It's more than likely because those things were never a problem until Attila Varadi exposed very blatantly, that Nemeth Chandler is probably a Freemason, and because why would he, defend and Freemasonry, the way he did, especially that he considers, Derek Prince his spiritual father, or at least that's what he was. The funny thing is that after this thing happened, that Derek Prince rebuked Shandor Nemeth first, before elders, and a little bit later at church, not as openly, but anybody who could read between the lines and spoke English, they could get the memo. The problem was that the interpreter, who is one of the most cynical and one of the most heartless person in the entire church, the interpreter back then did everything in his power to mistranslate what Derek Prince was saying in Faith Church. Derek Prince wasn't even a big fan of this so-called holy laughter thing, and he said a few critical words about that as well, as far as I remember, and that was entirely mistranslated. Entirely, it was generalized, and if you didn't speak English, you could only tell that there was a little bit, something was a bit off, but you wouldn't know what exactly it was. It was absolutely cynical. I've never seen anything like that. I've never seen such brave and such brazen, like blatant, like mistranslation. I've never seen anything like that in my life. And I'm a translator myself. I'm not saying I'm good at it, because I absolutely suck at it. I'm sorry, pardon my French. I'm not good at it, but I can tell when somebody's doing a good job or not. That guy is a really, really good translator, much better than myself, but that was a deliberate mistranslation, and it was absolutely disgraceful. After all this thing, the Derek Prince was systematically and ruthlessly character assassinated by the senior pastor and his wife, Judith, and he was told like everything, that he is just an old man. He probably demented. He doesn't even have anybody who looks after him. He doesn't even have a proper family around him. He doesn't even have a proper church around him. He's basically just a loner, and he's just he's probably his Anglican background is behind all that, and Ruth is Jezebel anyway. and so on and so on. So all these allegations were kind of like spread by via informal channels. So, and some of them, there's some witnesses still living with us who can attest to it, that this is what happened. And they started systematically work Ruth in the spiritual realm, meaning that they started cursing her. And soon enough, Ruth died of cancer, like my late father did. Yeah, a lot of financial nasty things, like came to light recently. Also, a lot of personal things, came out. This man, Shandor Nemeth, is not even worth to be called. Forget about pastor, forget about whatever position, whatever. He's not even worth to be called a Christian. I would go even further, and I would say that I don't consider him a person. A person doesn't behave like that. Like a decent human being doesn't behave the way he does behave, unfortunately. And the funny thing is, he knows. He could show, just like Hitler, I would say. He could show like human affection to some degree. Not affection, that's not the right word, because that's exactly what he never could show. What I would say, that he could show human consideration, that he had the capacity to understand, how he should be behaving, right? But he never could really emulate. The one thing that he never could emulate was love and true care. That is something he never could emulate, and he knows it, and he always knew it, strangely enough. Strangely enough, we almost all of us, have brothers, sisters, like basically relatives. I just recently became really, really critical. I became about the whole system, about the entire system. For me, what sealed the deal was that I spoke to some people who very, how should I put it, methodically, based on scripture, they broke it down to me that in the New Testament there is no such thing that as the men of God, as opposed to other people who are not men of God. Because in the New Testament setting, or in New Testament setting, everybody, all of us, we are all brothers and sisters. We all are men of God or women, and nobody should be, like reigning over anybody else, really. Jesus himself said that if somebody wants to be great among you, let him be your servant. If somebody wants to become first, let him be the slave of all of you. Let him be everybody's slave. So that was Jesus' approach, and he said that if I, who is your Lord and Master, wash your feet, then you also have to wash, each other's feet. So that is something that we never saw in Faith Church. It was all about control and silencing any dissent. And what Attila Váradi was talking about, the Secret Service, Bartos László Bartos also spoke about this, and I can tell you, because I also went on, errands, like not really bad ones, nothing like. But I, when it came to what is it called, election time, for example, there were these gangs, of the church, and we went out and basically vandalized these what are these called? This big billboard, like whatever advertisements of the opposing political party, whichever party the church leadership was siding with. The other most party with the most like likelihood of winning the election, we had to go and vandalize, in a creative way, those billboards. and also like put out, and it we did it all, everything for entire totally free, totally for free. um yeah, that's another thing, the senior pastor used, that he just gave just enough money, salary, for his men, meaning the pastors, that they had to take sort of kind of like bribes, from their local church members and everything. They had to use, like they had to kind of like use methods which weren't entirely, not necessarily illegal, but they were some way or another they were unethical. So people had to use unethical methods, to kind of like to get enough money to at least look prosperous, to remain in their positions. If you're not prosperous, in Faith Church or any other like such church, evangelical church, you are not blessed by the Lord, because if and therefore there must be some sort of a sin in your life. You must lead a sinful life or something like that. There is something wrong with you. There is either sin or a curse, or demons or something. Something is wrong with you if you're not obviously very rich. So basically, that was just another tactic used by the senior pastor to give little money to their men, so they have to find other ways to to get money, to make money. Okay, so yeah, what I was going to say before, that we all have like friends and family who are still in the church, and there is one person who still is ministers on stage, and he has a brother who at the very he was the first one who ever diagnosed the senior pastor as being a psychopath, a narcissistic psychopath. And I haven't even heard about this, for quite some time. So up until a few years back. So all these people who are still members of Faith Church, they live in an absolute information bubble. Whatever is being told to them from the pulpit, they believe it. If it's the polar opposite of what they heard the previous week, they will believe it still. They don't question it. That's how they are. They live in an information bubble. I know that, and I can attest to it, because that's how I used to be. And if you have like anything, kind of like if you have like critical thought or whatever, like something that you don't agree with, you can, and depending on your mindset, depending on your you would maybe complain about it, but never to the outsiders. No. So when it comes to the outside world, we are the perfect, like a family, like a dysfunctional family, where the father is abusing like everyone in the family, but at the same time he persuades them that if you opened up to the outside world, the outside world is even worse. So we are here, for each other, and we stick together and everything. It's a very, very typical cult. So it has all the characteristics of a typical cult. Like, a lot of people are absolutely afraid still. Like, most people who come out of the church, like when I came out of the church, I, being, the son of, Péter Uzoni, like a very revered person. When I came out finally and openly, and it's still on YouTube, these videos that I made, when I realized that my father, what my father told me on his deathbed was actually accurate, and he was right. When I realized it, I made basically an open confession and I uploaded it on Facebook, and then someone else uploaded it on YouTube. That was before I had my own YouTube channel. And yeah, I don't really want to stay much longer on YouTube. I don't like YouTube. I don't like Facebook. I don't like any of that. I just saw these things as useful tools for now, but I can see that these are just basically platforms where all dissident voices are basically either silenced or censored or shadow banned, and I'm not happy about it at all. If anything, I prefer Rumble, BitChute, Odyssey. These ones, I don't even know if there is any social media application or platform that is worth joining. Maybe Telegram, I don't know. But either way, these videos are still there, and when I came out, it obviously created some waves. So I uploaded one of these videos in which I talk about I shaved off my hair, my beard, and it was only a few days growth. So I looked really weird, and I talked about what my father told me on his deathbed. And Laszlo Bartos, when he heard about it, he wrote an article about it in this online newspaper which he runs in the United States, in Florida, and in a few days time 265,000 people read that article. 200, so more than a quarter million people read that in a few days time. That, I'm just saying, that's how much impact Faith Church has on Hungarian society, and obviously by implication European society as well. When I first came out in the United Kingdom, and I've heard about not soon after started this mass migration, this forced mass migration of mainly military age males from Muslim countries, Muslim majority countries. When I first heard about it, and I first heard that our Prime Minister was opposing it, and he's very outspoken, just like the Polish and a few other Eastern European countries, who still have some memory about Ottoman, what is it called? Yeah, invasion, and how life was back then. I was really proud to be Hungarian again for some time. But then, even though at that time I already knew that these people, the leader, the ruling party of Hungary, which has been winning elections for I don't know how many times, like fourth time in a row or something in a row, and by a massive margin, like 2/3 of the seats they have in the parliament, 2/3 for some, I don't know, third time in a row or something like that. It's absolutely unheard of. And the reason for that, mostly I think because they back traditional family values, and they stand on the right side of this forced mass migration. But I really have the feeling, and it's a feeling shared by a lot of other people, that it's just a mess. It's just a show. It's like a lot of people appreciate and understand these social constructionists who know exactly how people think and what is the predominant attitude in any given society, and they just give you on a platter the perfect candidate, who plays his role, and then everybody will support him, against the other horrible, side. So you, on the one side, you have the all these LGBT whatever people, yeah, and on the other side you have these people who say that they are Christians and everything, and at the same time they just steal and rob, and just basically silence everybody who, and just like they're absolutely ruthless people. When it comes to just one thing, if you are like, it's like in the Hungarian situation, for example, is really bad. Is really bad. Like Gabor Ivani, for example, this person who has been a critic, an outspoken critic of the present system, you know, they methodically, go after him and try to basically take everything out from underneath him. And this person hasn't seen this type of persecution back in the communist days. That's how bad it is now. So I don't think there is, and the reason why I'm saying this is because many people say, and I think they have a good point. I think they have a case. They say that our present prime minister, and the leading political party learned their methods in a big, how should I put it, in a big part from Sándor Németh and Faith Church, like how to manipulate people and how to create, what is it called, an image of the enemy. Sorry, that's just direct translation from Hungarian. I don't know how to say that in English. Like I said, I'm not a good interpreter. So how to create an image of the enemy that we can always point to, that if you don't choose us, if you don't follow us, that's what's going to happen. So it's a very, very, how should I put it, it's a very, very good way of, that's what Hitler used, that's what all sorts of other people, that's what the Soviet Union used. It works. It just works. It's a very effective way of controlling people's minds. Okay, so like I said, Sándor Németh is an absolutely fallen, and it's a disgraceful person. He's a disgrace, not just for Christianity. He's a disgrace for humanity. I have to say that, unfortunately, it's like there hasn't been one single thing that he hasn't denied from where he started. He denied everything, all the good things, all the values that he ever stood for. He denied all of them, either in words or in practice, or both. I'm telling you, you couldn't say one. You couldn't give me one aspect of whatever he stood for initially that he didn't, betray or deny, or kind of did, U-turn on. Okay. Again, maybe not again, but I don't really have anything to gain with this. The only reason why I'm doing this is I wanted to leave this whole thing behind me. I have better things to do. I have better things to spend my time with, and I know exactly what is going to come after this. I know how it works. I'm going to, again, I'm going to, go up, and maybe a few places on the curse list of faith churches, like curse squad. I know how it works. So I'm not gaining anything with it, The reason why I'm saying this, the reason why I'm talking about this is I am the firstborn of Péter Uzoni. He was the person who respected Derek Prince the most in Faith Church. He translated several of his books, and on his deathbed, he told me that Derek Prince rebuked Sándor Németh, the senior pastor. And Sándor Németh never accepted it. He never truly repented of terrorizing his people. Instead, because my father did accept it, he basically just created such an air about my father that my father got cancer and died very, very quickly. And the other funny thing is that after he passed, the senior pastor became absolutely paranoid. He became absolutely paranoid. He thought that he was the real, He thought that my father was assassinated, and he thought that the real target, was actually him. He thought that he was the one who they tried to kill, and they just made a mistake because they thought that my father was. Okay, so that's how bad it is. So I wouldn't be surprised if my father actually was, in a way, poisoned, some shape or form. I don't know. Could be that it was just, like a passive, suicide, as most cancers are, a passive suicide. I had cancer myself, and I know exactly what led to it, and I learned my lesson. Um, I wouldn't be surprised. This man has handlers. I'm telling you, Shandor Neiman has handlers. He is part. I don't know whether he's personally part of Freemasonry or not, or any of the lodges or not. But it's very all the markers, say that. Like there are red flags all over the place. There is definitely a connection. Derek Prince was very adamant and very blunt on it. You cannot be, as a Christian, you cannot be a part of any secret organizations, especially not Freemasonry. He said that several times on record. Okay? So all I'm saying this so you know what you're dealing with. These people, Shandor Neiman is a fraud. He's a cheat. He's a political harlot. He's a spiritual abuser, and he's a wolf. He's a wolf in sheep's clothes. Okay, that's all I wanted to say. God bless you, all of you, and may He grant us to have the spirit of discernment and most importantly, love. Not the love of money, but the love of God and the love of brothers. Not those brothers. Brothers in Christ. God bless.